Greetings people of YouTube, this is yet another quick video I didn't plan to make, but I might as well. Before anyone asks, yes I have seen the trailer for Legendary's next MonsterVerse film, that being Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. But I do not plan to cover that in the future, since all the MonsterVerse movies so far have sucked ass. GXK will be no different, and it will be gay.
Because it would be gay.
And yes I have seen the Skull Island Netflix anime, quote unquote, on watchcartoonsonline.tv, and barring most of episode 7, it was overall a piece of shit. Shock of all shocks. The only thing I remember from that show was a lesbian mother being jealous of her narcissistic teenage daughter's looks and hounding her down because of that, and that's not exactly a good sign, if that's the most memorable thing about the show months later. But enough about that. To my utter surprise, my interest is now geared towards Toho's next Reiwa entry, that being Godzilla Minus One, directed, written, and visual effects directed by Takashi Yamazaki. Now if you have watched this channel in the past, it should be no big surprise that I'm not exactly a major supporter and or fan of the first Godzilla 1954 movie. That being said, my point is, with this video, is that even some of the earliest indications indicate that Godzilla Minus One will blow the original Godzilla right out of the water. It must be stressed that this is strictly based on factual observations and historical facts, and is not merely one arsehole's opinion versus every other arsehole's opinion out there. And the recent leaks will have no bearing. So without further ado, let's discuss why Godzilla Minus One will be greater than Godzilla 1954. When you look at the directors of the past films, you'll spot a pattern that the longer they sat in the director's chair, the more they learned from their past mistakes. By and large, I think that most of the original Godzilla movies' problems were signs of the fact that Eiichiro Honda was a new director who didn't know what he was doing. He had the passion, but not the skills to fully realize his vision. He did however improve his directing in considerable leaps, after seeing what Raids Again director Motoyoshi Oda did, and experimenting with other monster movies, all to fine-tune his creative vision, and get better at his skills. And it particularly shows in King Kong vs. Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla, his personal favorite Godzilla's Revenge, and lastly Terror of Mechagodzilla regardless of that film's ticket sales. Likewise, Yamazaki has had more experience in his filmography since his directorial debut in the year 2000. He's directed a variety of films, commercials, music videos, video games, and most recently theme park attractions. Now I can only find Always Sunset on 3rd Street 2 online, but not 1 and 3 for some reason. And I've seen footage of Godzilla the Ride at Seibayun online. From those two properties, it's clear that Yamazaki has a passion for his craft, and has the proper craftsmanship to do it. He has a fascination with the Tokyo TV broadcasting tower, much like a Francophile would have a fascination for the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. And if you look at how Godzilla is used in these properties, you'll see a through line of him being put in a post-World War II Japan setting in ruins, or at least resembling firebombed Japanese cities. But the thing is, Tokyo Tower was built as a symbol of Japan's escalating post-war economic recovery, so we won't get to see Godzilla knock it over, but it fits well with the idea that Japan's economic state goes from 0 to -1, from bad to worse. And it didn't have anything to do with taxes. Needless to say, this type of Godzilla is the vision Takashi has and has been itching to tell since 2007. So it'll be very interesting to see what he has in store. It won't be questioned by anyone with a competent knowledge of World War II history that Emperor Hirohito, posthumously known as Emperor Showa, surrendered to Allied forces, most notably United States forces under General Douglas MacArthur. Whether or not these two men were closeted homosexuals in a relationship is another topic. Now even though Japan took massive beatings in the form of firebombings and the nukes, a lot of Americans wanted to see the Japanese punished for the bombing of Pearl Harbor and other nasty war crimes, but MacArthur wanted to maintain friendly relationships between the USA and Japan. The best way to do that was not execute the emperor, because many Japanese people at the time were radical state Shintoists. To be clear, I'm not an expert in Shintoism. I don't know if Shintoism commands the annihilation of all non-Japanese people the world over, much like Islam commands everyone to submit or die, but I do know this. At the time, the Japanese believed the emperor was a direct descendant of their sun goddess Amaterasu, and that it was their manifest destiny to expand the Japanese empire far and wide into the Pacific Islands and into China. Sounds like Avatar: The Last Airbender, now that I think about it. As if the Americans stopping them from achieving their goal wasn't bad enough, executing the emperor along with his family would have been seen as iconoclastic. So the best way to deal with Hirohito was abolish state Shintoism and have him renounce his divinity in favor of humanity on air every New Year's Day. Anyway, the Treaty of San Francisco would have been signed and effective by 1952, bringing an end to the Allied occupation of Japan, but a military alliance between the United States and Japan had been formed by then. Ergo, we'll most likely see Japan gain help from American forces in combating Godzilla, much like we saw in the American release of Mothra vs. Godzilla, also known as Godzilla vs. the Thing, for some retarded reason. So narratively, it would make a whole lot sense for the Japanese to ask the American forces for help, and it would make a very compelling story about letting go of your damaged pride and embracing humility to heal your shame, as Uncle Iroh says. I've already gotten a lot of flack for my take on Raids again being better than 1954, but still to this day, I'm more than equipped to take on all the fanboys. I'm looking at you, Mario. So, when I say -1 will have fully realized ideas, a good example would be the original 1933 King Kong movie and its 2005 remake. The original King Kong is definitely a standard action-adventure movie, but it's a better movie than Godzilla 1954. It's got better characters, a more engaging story, and the fact that the creatures are all stop motion is rather impressive for the time it was made in. Jump forward to 2005, Peter Jackson pays homage to the original movie, since it inspired him to become a filmmaker, and the film itself greatly expands on the ideas of the original. The story is longer, but that's not really a criticism. No second of screen time is wasted in developing the characters. The world building specifically is phenomenal, so phenomenal that there's even documentaries about it. While Kong has been knocked on for looking too gorilla-like, he's a more fully realized character than he was previously. He's more expressive thanks to Andy Serkis's talent, and his relationship with Anne is rather engaging and heartbreaking by the end. The original 1954 Godzilla movie, on the other hand, as said in my video years back, had ideas but they didn't live up to their fullest potential. Even by tell-don't show standards, the characters are paper thin. There are a lot of video game characters with a lot more depth than them. Even the military strategy, to keep Godzilla out of the city, falls apart with the slightest amount of scrutiny. I mean, why build an electrical barrier along the shore when Godzilla can just come ashore somewhere else and walk around it?
What? Around it? Around it?
Yeah, that was really retarded. If what happens on screen constitutes as visual storytelling, then the limitations are even shown through the original's choppy editing. The biggest offender I can think of is when the train hits Godzilla's foot. He appears to loom over to pick it up in his mouth, but it cuts away. Cutting back, it's in his mouth. How is an audience supposed to remain immersed when there's nothing connecting simplistic events like people going to places or objects being misplaced? Ultimately, you can call this a directing issue or even a writing issue, as these may be all the editor had to work with, but assuming he had all the connecting scenes, it made no sense to put the movie together like this. On the contrary, -1 is essentially going to be a remake of the original movie, as Tomoaki Tanaka wanted to do back in the 1970s, and even some fans like Fan 1993 once discussed what a remake would have been like. But it will no doubt have its own story and characters. And unlike the original, it'll be including fictional portrayals of historical figures and events. Therefore it will have to integrate them faithfully into the narrative. And since -1 will have a higher budget, no doubt it's going to surpass any other film prior in terms of production value, including Shin Godzilla. Even as shown in the trailer, we see Godzilla looming over a train like in the original movie, but this time we see him biting down onto the train car. That's an automatic win in my books. Lastly, Minus Goji will overall be a better Godzilla than Shodai Goji. Obviously the monster design is better, although Toho is reusing the 50s sound design, it's revamped to sound more impactful. But so far, from everything I've seen, Minus Goji is turning out to be the best iteration of Godzilla I've seen. Minus Goji will be portrayed as a CGI model, which will no doubt upset staunch Toho purists who still haven't gotten over Godzilla no longer being just a man in a rubber suit, but the good thing about being a CGI model is that your model will remain consistent in size in between shots. When you watch the original Godzilla movie, you can tell if it's the suit or the puppet, and it's honestly distracting, because they are not consistent with each other. The puppet looks more chibi than the suit. It's rumored that Shodai Goji was actually brown, and is only described as charcoal gray, since the original is a black and white movie. Now you do have one official source saying the body surface is gray with oil-based paint sprayed on white rubber, and the inside of the mouth is painted bright red to make a difference in color, but then another official source says the body color was red-black, and not gray, and another saying it was gray or brown, and it was a dull color. It's such a massive cluster of contradictions that doesn't go together. It's not a combination that works, it's not interesting, it's just terrible. Minus One on the other hand will portray Godzilla as somewhat brownish to play on that rumor, but it'll stick to it. An attribute of Godzilla that a lot of people like to point out but nobody can really justify is his skin texture being inspired by keloid scars of nuclear bomb victims. The problem with that as I see it is that it's not even mentioned by anyone that Godzilla appears to be a victim of a nuclear detonation. On top of that, that's not even what keloid scars look like. Shodai Goji's skin texture looks more like tree bark than it does the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm just sorry it's no good. Minus Goji's skin texture on the other hand does appear to resemble keloid scars, some protrusions appear boilish. It also goes the extra mile by appearing to be peeling off as shown on his legs in this shot from the trailer, much like skin infected with radiation dermatitis. And finally, Shodai Goji's affiliation was barely touched on, but not really clear. He's not like King Kong who was taken from his domain and put on display and shot down. How can it be that he's seeking revenge on humanity for nuclear tests disrupting his underwater sanctuary when that's just a theory and not a fact? Is his tragedy that he's a victim of nuclear testing? Well, how can I feel sorry for him when he literally burns Tokyo to the ground? As far as we know for Minus Goji, his affiliation as either hero or villain is obviously clear. His expression tells me that he's in a lot of pain from severe nuclear burns, he has a chip on his shoulder, and he's lashing out at anything he comes across. It's unfortunate that the Japanese people are going to be on the receiving end of that stick, when they've already been on the receiving end of a stick years prior. So there you have it, my 4 reasons as to why I think Godzilla Minus One will be better than Godzilla 1954. Agree, disagree, would love to hear about it as per usual in the comments section below. Please express ideas as to why you think it's going to end up being a better movie or maybe not. Alright, anyway, I'm done. Good night.